Hello YouTube, this is Bence from Moto Customs. Thank you so much for joining again. We're back at the Triumph Daytona T595 and this time we're gonna assemble the front end. So in order to remove this bearing, I have to get to it somehow, and due to the stoppers, the steering stoppers here, I actually don't have that much room. I have one of these bearing pullers that I would like to put under the bearing, but as I mentioned, I can't due to the stoppers. So I decided to just cut off the basket, and then I'm going to try to attach the bearing puller right under the top lip of the bottom race. So now that I have removed the basket, I actually have enough clearance right above the stoppers that I can put this bearing puller and put it under this large lip that the bottom race has here. So now that I have assembled everything, I need something to push against, and I'm going to use this flat metal piece so I don't damage the thread on the steering stem. And now that everything is set up, I should be able to get that bearing off. And it's coming right off without any real struggle. Now that the bottom race is off, we need to get this cleaned up. I mean the 333 itself. I'm going to go through with some glass bead blasting at low pressures. So basically just to polish the surface, and then we're going to have to install the new bearing afterwards. Got the outer bearing race for the bottom here, and I've also got a brand new bearing for the top. We're gonna use an easy method to place them in the frame. I'm just going to use a large threaded rod, put it through the frame, put some washers in here. I'm gonna use the old outer race to push in the new one on the bottom side, and I'm going to use this old bearing to push in the front one. So of course it's important that with a ball bearing, you're only pushing on the outside if you're putting it inside a frame like this. And of course it's important that you are pressing only on the outer edge here when you're putting in the race, so you don't damage the surfaces. We snug up the knot and we've aligned everything correctly. the outer bearing race is halfway into the frame. This is the part where it's actually starting to be hard to push in without this contraption here. And of course also the bottom, the top bearing, sorry, is placed in the frame and everything is aligned. So I'm only pushing at the right surfaces. And the next thing to do is grab a wrench and start tightening this. And of course, as you are tightening, you go back and forth and check that everything is correctly aligned. And then you just gotta tighten it all the way down, and your bearing races and the top bearing is going to be in place. This bearing is going in a tiny bit crooked, so I'm gonna loosen it just a little bit and then also adjust so everything is in center. It's important that you keep checking that everything is going in straight, so you don't pull in the bearing races crooked. The bottom race is in and the top bearing is in as well. The next step after pressing the bearing onto the bottom 333 is lubing up the bearing. I'm gonna use some LM47 liquid moly. This is a very long life grease, so I'm gonna generously lube up the bearing. Make sure that there's plenty of lubrication for this. I'm just gonna put a dab of grease onto the thread here. On this bike, the steering head bearing adjustment is actually done when the bike is completely assembled. So there's no set torque for this here. So what I'm doing is just snugging it down all the way that I can with my fingers, and that will give you a very good baseline. Putting on the top yoke and the nut for the top yoke, and I've put a tiny bit of grease here just so it can easier be tightened. For the stop nut there's actually a 40 Newton meter set torque, but of course we're not going to tighten it down just yet because we haven't adjusted the steering head bearings themselves. Believe it or not guys, it's finally time to install the completely rebuilt forks back into the frame, and if you haven't seen the video about the rebuild, link is in the description below. The only thing I've done is I've slightly greased the bolts that are in the bottom triple clamp, just because they are stainless steel and they are going in aluminium. The manual says that the fork top should be flush with the top yoke, and that's what we're going to go for as well. For these bolts, the manual calls for a specific torque value, which is 20 Newton meters. So we're going to torque these down. Just before I torque these down, I'm gonna check the front spindle if it slides in easily and make sure that the forks are at the same level. And it slides in very, very easy just by hand, which indicates that we are at the right height outside of the top yoke on both sides. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque them down. I'm just gonna tighten them back and forth slowly, not just torque one down and be done with it, but just go back and forth and get to the right torque value. So this side is good. We're gonna go do the same on the other side. Just double checking, the front axle still moves very easily. I'm going to install the clip-ons as well. I've also lightly greased these bolts. And of course, I will also need to install the bolts in the top yoke, and for that I need to move these. So I will probably just torque them down together with the top yoke bolts. And the very last thing we're going to do in this video is install the front wheel. Of course, this will have to come out because it has to be painted and the tire needs to be replaced. But for now, I'm going to install it. So as soon as we have the back end ready, we have a rolling chassis that we can move around the workshop and start on the engine. There we have it. The front end is assembled and we are ready to put the back end together as well to complete our rolling chassis, and afterwards we're gonna take a look at the engine.